"And you are worth nothing," my mother-in-law said straight to my face, while my husband, the man I loved more than life itself, pulled my clothes out of the closet and threw them onto the floor. They laughed, certain they could do whatever they wanted. But that laughter vanished when a loud bang echoed the doorbell. They didn't know that behind that door stood my father, Colonel James Whitaker, and that visit would change their lives forever. Since I was a child, I had always dreamed of having a big, close family. My mother left when I was little, and my father, an officer in the United States Army, was always busy with orders, rules, and long deployments. I knew he loved me, but his love was cold, expensive gifts on birthdays, or a few minutes of phone calls from the base. I grew up on my own, learning to be independent. When I met Ethan Cole, I thought I had finally found my safe place. He was gentle, caring, and had a mother, Margaret Cole, whom I believed could be the mother I never had. The first year of marriage was wonderful. We lived separately in Seattle, and everything felt like a fairy tale. Ethan always hugged me, and his mother was sweet, calling me daughter, and saying her son was lucky to have me. But everything changed when we moved in with her. The reason was to help her after she was widowed and to save money. I didn't know I had just stepped into a nightmare. The first signs were small: a vase out of place, a meal I cooked not to her taste. Once I made Southern-style beef soup. She looked offended, ate only bread, then complained of stomach pain. Ethan only said, "You know how my mom is, she gets upset easily." I endured it. I longed for a family so much that I accepted everything. But gradually, Margaret's words turned venomous. She mocked my job managing a beauty salon, saying I served empty-headed women. She kept reminding everyone that her son, a successful lawyer, deserved someone better. "My friend's daughter is a prosecutor," she'd say, as if my career was worthless. Then she asked, "What do you even have to offer my son? No family, no background." I stayed silent, swallowing every bitter word. The worst part was Ethan pretending not to hear. He ate as if nothing was happening. His coldness hurt more than her insults. The gentle man I once loved disappeared, replaced by someone irritable, selfish, and angry. When I tried to talk about his mother, he exploded, "Lennon, enough, my mother is sacred. She gave me life, and you want me to turn against her over petty things?" I called my father less and less, ashamed to admit that my happy family was falling apart. I knew if I told him, he'd come and take me home immediately without giving me a choice. But I still loved Ethan. I thought it was just a rough phase that he'd understand eventually, and things would go back to how they were. I was completely wrong. The turning point came on my mother-in-law's birthday. I had spent weeks preparing, took a day off work, and cooked all her favorite dishes. I even bought her an expensive silk scarf she once admired. I just wanted to be loved, to be seen as a good daughter-in-law. After the party, we were cleaning up. My mother-in-law didn't look happy, though she'd just praised me in front of her friends, giving me hope. "Sweetheart, where's the blue tea set Aunt Linda gave us?" Ethan asked. "Oh, that's gone," she frowned. "Lennon broke it. Her hands are like feet, can't hold anything properly." That was a blatant lie. A month earlier, she dropped it herself while reaching for the sugar jar. I cleaned it up and comforted her not to feel bad. I softly said, "Mrs. Margaret, that's not true. You accidentally dropped it." She spun around, her face twisting with rage. "What did you just say? Are you calling me a liar in my own house? You freeloader." Ethan immediately sided with her, his jaw tight. "Lennon apologized to my mother. How dare you talk to her like that?" Something inside me shattered. All the pain and humiliation I had buried erupted. "I will not apologize for something I didn't do. She lies and humiliates me constantly. And you're a coward who pretends nothing's happening." Ethan's face turned red. "Coward? You'll see." He yelled and struck me across the face. The slap wasn't hard, but it froze me, not from pain, but from betrayal. My ears rang as my mother-in-law sneered, satisfied like she had just won. She looked at me with a smug smile. "Finally, time to teach this woman her place. Pack her things, Ethan. This house doesn't need the ungrateful." Ethan moved like a man possessed, went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and threw my clothes onto the floor. I stood frozen in the living room, my hand still on my cheek, unable to believe what was happening. My dream of a family was gone, The man I loved most was throwing me out. Then the doorbell rang loud and insistent, as if it knew a storm was about to hit. My mother-in-law frowned. Who could it be at this hour? Ethan came out of the room holding a pile of my dresses. Go open it. Maybe one of your nosy friends came to rescue you. I trembled as I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. My father was standing there. He wore civilian clothes, but his posture was upright and commanding, unmistakably a soldier. Behind him stood two young men with short hair, wearing dark jackets, their expressions stern. I hadn't called or sent any message. How did he know? My hands shook as I unlocked the door. My mother-in-law and husband watched me, smirking, probably thinking someone had come to comfort me. But their smiles faded as the door opened, and a silver-haired man with a piercing gaze stepped inside. My father. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on the red mark on my cheek. Then on Ethan, still holding my dresses, and on my mother-in-law, frozen with a crooked smile. In the heavy silence, his voice rang out firm as a gunshot. Good evening. I came just in time, didn't I? He spoke clearly, with a tone no one dared challenge. Their smiles vanished completely, replaced by fear. Dad. I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sorrow but of relief. My father was here. And I knew from this moment on, everything would change. He stepped forward, gently moved me aside, and stood between them and me. His gaze toward Ethan was icy enough to extinguish fire. Young man, he said slowly, pointing at the clothes in Ethan's hands, put my daughter's belongings back. It seems they just slipped from your hands. Ethan froze. His usual confidence vanished. He looked to his mother for help, but Margaret's face was pale, her mouth open, unable to meet my father's eyes or the eyes of the two soldiers standing silently by the door. And at that moment, she realized something. The worthless, familyless daughter-in-law she had despised was anything but ordinary. Her world, the one where she had always believed herself the queen, was collapsing before her eyes. And this was only the beginning. She was the first to react, trying to regain her usual arrogance, but failing. Her voice trembled. Who are you? This is a family matter. Outsiders have no right to interfere. My father didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on Ethan. I'll repeat myself, he said, emphasizing every word. Put my daughter's things back. One of the soldiers behind him stepped forward, just one small movement, but it was enough to make Ethan drop everything in fear. My dresses fell to the floor, crumpled. Colonel James Whitaker. Ethan stammered, as if only now remembering my father's name, the man he had met at our wedding. This is just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? My father turned his head sharply, eyes locked on him. My daughter was struck, and you call that a misunderstanding? Margaret froze, then rushed forward to defend her son. It wasn't his fault. She provoked him first. She insulted me. She screamed, desperate for attention. My father finally turned to her, and his look was more terrifying than any shout. You may be his mother, he said quietly but firmly, but to Lennon, you're nothing. Listen carefully. I've never allowed anyone to harm my daughter, and you won't be the first. He took a step forward. Instinctively, both of them backed into the wall. And in that moment, I understood everything. All this time I had tried to belong to their family, to please them, to earn their love. But the truth was, my real family had always been there. I just needed the courage to reach out. My father turned to me, his eyes softening. Lennon, sweetheart, get ready. We're going home. I bent down to pick up my things, but he stopped me. No need, he said firmly. You won't take anything from here. I'll buy you everything new better than this. Nothing here belongs to you, and it never will. He took my hand, strong and warm. He led me past Ethan and Margaret, both standing pale and speechless. At the door, my father stopped, turned slightly, and without looking at them, said coldly, as for that misunderstanding you mentioned, we'll discuss it tomorrow somewhere more official. His voice was a sentence. We stepped into the hallway. One of the soldiers quietly closed the door behind us. I took a deep breath. That was the moment my old life ended and a new chapter began. But I knew one thing. I was no longer alone. Justice had just begun its course. We drove through the city in silence, Under the glow of streetlights and neon signs, the light blurred as if I were looking through a pane of wet glass. My father sat beside me, eyes fixed ahead, his face as solemn as a statue. Victor, his aide, was driving, and Ian, the other young man, sat in the front seat. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Dad, how did you know something happened?" My voice trembled. He didn't answer right away, just kept his gaze forward. "I've known for a while that something was wrong," he said hoarsely. His tone carried sadness and a weary smile. "And you always said, 'I'm fine, Dad. Everything's great.' I'm a soldier, Lennon. I don't trust words. I trust actions. And your actions didn't match your words." He explained that he had asked Victor, the son of an old comrade, to quietly keep an eye on me from afar, just to make sure that if anything went wrong, someone would alert him. "Today, he called me. Said he saw something off through your window, heard shouting, strange laughter. I was already in the city for a 2-day meeting, so I got in the car and came straight here." He spoke as if recounting an ordinary story, but to me, every word felt like it was changing my entire world. All this time, while I thought I'd been abandoned, he had been watching over me, silently protecting me. Without waiting for me to call for help, he had sensed my pain from afar and was ready to act when needed. We arrived at a small but elegant hotel in Seattle. Everything had already been prepared by my father. "Get some rest," he said, leading me into the room. "Sleep well tomorrow. Don't think about anything." But how could I not think? When he closed the door behind him, I was left alone with the silence and the flood of pain I had been holding back for so long. The wall I had built to protect myself, made of illusions about a perfect family, didn't just collapse, it turned to dust. I walked to the mirror. Ethan's handprint was still visible on my cheek, but what hurt more was the look in my own eyes. Empty. I wasn't crying over a broken marriage anymore. I was crying for my own naivety, for believing that if I just endured, if I just behaved, I would be loved. I cried all night until I finally fell asleep at dawn. A deep, dreamless sleep. In the morning, a soft knock woke me. My father was there, holding a breakfast tray and a large cardboard box. "Good morning," he said cheerfully, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed that he hadn't slept at all. "Eat, and this is for you." Inside the box were simple but complete essentials: a pretty dress, soft shoes, underwear, and a few personal items. He had taken care of everything. While I ate, he laid out the plan, clear and brief, like a military order. "At 10 o'clock, we'll go back to get your papers and whatever you need. There will be a short conversation, no emotions left." I nodded. "Understood, Dad." I truly felt nothing anymore except resolve. At exactly 10 o'clock, we stood again before the house that had been my home just the day before. This time, my father was the one to knock. Ethan opened the door. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His skin pale, eyes red. When he saw us, his hands trembled. "Please come in," he murmured. Margaret Cole was sitting in the living room, dressed in dark, formal clothes. She stood and approached, her expression feigned, pretending nothing had happened. "Mr. Whitaker, Lennon, it's so good you came. We were worried about you all night." Ethan couldn't sleep. He's truly remorseful. "It was all just a misunderstanding, stress, that's all." My father raised his hand to stop her. "We're not here to listen to apologies," he said coldly. "Lennon is only here to collect her papers, personal belongings and property." Margaret pressed her lips together but forced a polite smile. Of course. Everything that belongs to Lennon will be returned. We're not barbarians." Ethan silently went into the bedroom, then came back with my handbag. Inside were my passport and documents. "Here," he muttered. "Your box is still on the vanity." I went to the room and gathered what was truly mine: a few photos, some of my mother's jewelry, a few books. I could feel their eyes watching me, thinking this would all end easily, that I would just take my things and vanish from their lives. I pulled my small suitcase out of the room, leaving behind everything they considered their property. As I passed through the living room, Margaret sighed dramatically, as if performing on stage. "Well then, Lennon, if that's your decision, we wish you all the best. I hope you hold no grudges." My father, who had been silent until then, took one step forward. "It's not over," he said, his deep voice full of authority. There's still the matter of finances. Ethan stiffened immediately. Margaret pretended to look surprised. Finances? What do you mean? Lennon lived with us, we gave her everything. What more could she possibly want? My father smiled faintly, a smile without warmth. I'm referring to the $200,000 I gifted you as a wedding present, intended for your own house. Since the marriage is over and the house was never purchased, I expect that money to be returned. Margaret's face shifted from confusion to panic. 200,000? What are you talking about? She screamed, losing all composure. We have no idea what you mean. That was our savings, right, Ethan? My father pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. This is a bank statement, he said, opening it. A direct transfer from my account to your son's, clearly labeled, wedding gift from the bride's father. Date, 1 day after the wedding. Ethan went pale and lowered his head. He knew it was true. But Margaret wasn't ready to surrender. That paper is fake. Are you accusing us of fraud? We'll sue you for defamation. My father pointed at Ethan. Ask your son. He remained silent, head down, hands trembling. For the first time, I didn't see him as cruel, just a weak man who had spent his whole life under his mother's shadow. Margaret realized she could no longer rely on him. She turned to me, her face twisted with fury. This is all your fault. You planned this from the start to take this house, and now the money too. Enough. My father's voice cracked through the air like a whip. He stood between us. The money was transferred into your son's account, he said firmly. And from what I know, it was used to buy a new car, pay your debts, and cover Ethan's large loans, things my daughter had no knowledge of. Margaret's mouth dropped open, shocked that he knew everything. She thought her financial secrets were well hidden. Ethan, hearing about the debts, collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Both of them were trapped in their own greed and lies. I looked at them no longer with hatred, only disappointment, and perhaps a bit of pity, especially for Ethan. My father spoke again, his tone sharp and commanding. You have 1 week 7 days to return the full amount to my daughter's account. If not, this statement, along with yesterday's witness testimony and a formal fraud complaint, will go straight to the prosecutor's office. And trust me, we'll file a formal complaint and let the authorities handle the case. He turned. Lennon, let's go. We left. As we reached the hallway, I heard a soft voice behind me. Lennon, I'm sorry. I didn't turn around. I didn't know if it was real remorse or just fear of the storm that was coming. My father closed the door behind us. It seemed like everything was over. The money would be returned, justice had been served. But we had no idea that Margaret Cole was not the kind to surrender easily. Her final strike wasn't about money, it was aimed straight at me. We returned to the hotel in Portland. My father looked calm, as if a mission had been completed. But I felt hollow. This victory brought no joy. While he was on the phone handling business, I sat by the window, staring at the distant city lights. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated but answered. Lennon, the voice was low, cold. It was Margaret. I was about to hang up, but something in her tone made me stop. She wasn't angry or venomous as usual, just calm. Don't hang up, dear, she whispered. I'm not calling to argue. I just want to give you a piece of advice. Withdraw the complaint. Forget about the money. If you don't, you'll regret it. Are you threatening me? I asked flatly. She gave a small laugh. A threat? No. Just friendly advice. Your father, that honorable colonel, doesn't know everything. There's a little secret. About your origins. Haven't you ever wondered why your mother really left? And who your real father is? Her words slid into me like poison. A secret about my origins. That topic had always been forbidden in our house. My father never spoke of my mother, only said, she's gone. I had assumed she died or couldn't bear living with a strict soldier. I was afraid to ask, afraid to hurt him. And now, the woman who had ruined my marriage claimed she knew the truth, a truth that could make my father reject me forever. What? What are you talking about? I whispered, my throat dry. She laughed again, coldly. You'll find out if you don't do what I say. You have 1 week. Either drop the case and forget the money, let the secret die with me, or keep the money and lose everything else. Your choice, Lennon. Then she hung up. I stood frozen, the phone icy in my hand. Before me was the hardest decision of my life. What if she was telling the truth? What if everything I believed about my family was a lie? I looked at my father still on the phone, steady, composed, with that resolute expression. That strength of his suddenly frightened me. All day, I felt lost in a fog. I kept telling myself it was manipulation, her last attempt to escape paying back the money. But the seed of doubt had been planted. What if my father wasn't really my father? By late afternoon, he noticed something was wrong. "What's the matter, Lennon? Overthinking again? I told you it's all over. Don't worry anymore." I couldn't tell him the truth. How could I say that woman had just threatened to reveal a secret about my mother, something that could destroy everything? "I'm fine, Dad. Just a little tired," I lied. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her question echoed endlessly in my head. Who is your real father? What if it was true? What if my father's steadfast love was just an illusion? But if it wasn't, why were there no photos of my mother anywhere in our house? The next morning, I made my decision. I couldn't live with the doubt. I had to find the truth myself and never let that woman control me again. I searched the address online, then went to the law firm where Ethan worked. I didn't call ahead. I needed to look him in the eye to know if he and his mother had been telling the truth. Maybe, out of guilt, he'd slip up. When I walked into the sleek office in downtown Seattle, the receptionist looked at me in surprise. "Attorney Ethan Cole isn't in today," she said. "He's on an extended unpaid leave." I froze. He'd run away. But I didn't stop. "Do you know where Mrs. Margaret Cole lives?" I asked, my heart pounding. She shrugged, then handed me a slip of paper, the same house I had left just the day before. I went alone, without telling my father. This time I had to face the past by myself. I didn't realize that with one more knock on a door, I'd be stepping closer to a truth far more terrifying than anything I'd imagined. I stood in front of that door. No father, no guards, just me, my heartbeat, and my determination to learn the truth, no matter the cost. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. I heard slow, dragging footsteps behind the door. It creaked open slightly, revealing a sliver of light and Margaret's frightened eyes. When she saw me, she tried to close it, but I blocked it with my foot. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "Go away," she whispered. "I don't want to see you." "I don't have a choice," I replied, pushing the door open. "If you don't let me in, I'll tell the neighbors everything. I'll call the police and explain how you and your son threw me out of the house. Do you want a scandal?" That did it. I knew how much she valued her reputation as a respectable woman. Grinding her teeth, she stepped aside and let me in. The apartment looked like a storm had passed through, clothes scattered everywhere, dirty dishes piled up, the smell of damp air. Margaret Cole wore an old robe, her hair a tangled mess, her face swollen, glaring at me with a mixture of hatred and exhaustion. Nothing was left of the proud woman she once was. "What more do you want?" she rasped, sinking into the sofa. "Your father nearly ruined us. Ethan ran off with friends and won't even look at me. You destroyed our family." "No," I said calmly, sitting across from her. "You destroyed your own family with your lies and greed. But that's not why I'm here. I came to ask, what did you mean when you mentioned a secret about my identity?" She let out a shaky laugh. "Ah, so that's what you really care about. I knew you couldn't resist your curiosity." "I thought you were lying," I said. "Oh no, dear, I wasn't joking." She leaned back, her eyes glinting with malice. She knew she still had something she could use to manipulate me, her last card. "All right," she said slowly, her voice deliberate. "I'll tell you, but on one condition: you give up that money. Otherwise, I'll tell your father everything. And trust me, he won't take it well." I looked straight into her eyes and saw she wasn't bluffing. She would destroy anyone, even me, to keep what she thought was hers. Once again, I was forced to choose, money or truth. "Fine," I said, swallowing hard. "I'll give up the money. Now talk." Her face brightened, a triumphant smile spreading across her lips. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if preparing to unveil a devastating secret. "Your father, James Whitaker, is not your biological father. Your mother, Veronica, was once my best friend. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Chicago. She was beautiful, and I was her shadow. Every man adored Veronica, even James. Back then, he was just a young, handsome officer with a bright future. He was in love with her, but she loved someone else. She paused, savoring the moment, as if relishing my reaction. His name was Gregory Hale, she continued. A poor but talented artist, charming, smooth-talking. Veronica was madly in love with him. They met in secret, until she got pregnant with you. Gregory panicked. She shrugged. Responsibility? Family? Forget it. He ran off with his art supplies and disappeared. Veronica stayed behind, pregnant and ashamed. And that's when James came back. He still loved her. He proposed and promised to raise the baby as his own. She straightened up, pride flickering across her worn face. He saved her, gave her a name, respect, stability. But Veronica couldn't live with the guilt. She couldn't stay with a man she didn't love. Every time she saw him, she was reminded of her past. So when you were 3, she left. Left him. Left you. Disappeared. Every word from her felt like a blade cutting through my heart. The man who had raised and protected me wasn't my real father, yet he had loved me, cared for me, even knowing I was the child of the man who broke his heart. His love wasn't just paternal, it was something greater, an act of selflessness I had never truly understood. And my mother, she hadn't died, she had simply been too weak to stay. Tears fell not from self-pity, but from gratitude and admiration for the man I'd always called father. And from the bitter sorrow of realizing the mother I'd idealized was now only a fragile ghost. How do you know all this? I asked quietly. Veronica told me before she left. Margaret answered, lips twisting into a crooked smile. We were friends once. She left me a letter for James, but I never gave it to him. Why would I? So he could know she never loved him. I burned it. Then I told him Veronica had run off with another man, told him not to look for her. I did it for his own good, to save him from more pain. She stared at me, her tone turning sharp. Now, keep your word. Call your father and tell him you don't want the money anymore. I looked at her, eyes dry. Inside, there was only cold emptiness. No, I said softly but firmly. What? We had a deal. No deal, I said, standing up. It was blackmail. You told your story, twisted, fabricated, manipulative, the same tricks you probably used on my mother years ago. But you're wrong. Your truth doesn't destroy my love for my father. It only makes me love and respect him 1,000 times more. She screamed, you ungrateful brat. I'll tell him everything right now. Go ahead, I said calmly, walking to the door. But remember, my father is a colonel. He despises liars and anyone who tries to divide his family. And I don't think he'll enjoy hearing someone slander the woman he's loved his whole life. I slammed the door behind me. My legs trembled, but I held my head high as I walked away. I didn't know if she'd actually call him, or if he'd believe her, but I knew one thing: I was no longer a victim. I was his daughter, and I would fight for him, for his honor, the same way he had fought for me. When I returned to the hotel, my father was in the room, packing his bags. His business trip was nearly over. You all right, sweetheart? You look exhausted, he said. Dad, we need to talk. I looked into his eyes, the lines at their corners, the gray in his hair, and my heart ached with love. I told him everything about Margaret, the blackmail, the story she had told me. He listened silently, his face growing hard as stone. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, then spoke hoarsely. She was right, partly. He looked directly at me, and in his eyes was a deep pain that made me want to hold him. It's true, I'm not your biological father. Your mother, Veronica, loved a man named Gregory Hale, an artist. And yes, he left her when he found out she was pregnant. He paused, his voice firming. But everything else she said was a lie. Your mother didn't run away. She loved you more than her own life. She never abandoned you, and she never betrayed me. When Gregory disappeared, she came to me as a friend. She told me everything and asked for advice. I loved her, Lennon, more than anyone in this world. I told her I'd marry her, raise you as my own. His voice broke. All I ever wanted was to give you both a home. And we were happy, truly happy. Your mother was grateful, and I was content just to be with you. He opened his suitcase and pulled out an old leather wallet. From a hidden pocket, he took out a faded photograph, a beautiful young woman with bright eyes, holding a smiling baby girl in her arms. My mother and me. Then his face darkened. Then Margaret came back, he said bitterly. Yes, she was once Veronica's friend, but the kind who only knows envy. She envied her beauty, her talent, and the love everyone gave her. She began whispering poison that I wasn't truly happy, that I could never love a child who wasn't my blood. She wanted to destroy everything. He lowered his head, his voice trembling. Then Veronica fell ill. She had a severe heart condition, needed urgent surgery abroad, incredibly expensive. I was ready to sell everything, borrow, beg anyone I could. But it still wasn't enough. Then one day, Margaret came. Veronica said she claimed to have found Gregory Hale, now a wealthy man living in Europe, willing to pay for her surgery, but on one condition. Veronica had to go with him and leave us forever. That woman wasn't just cruel, she was a monster. Veronica refused, my father said, his voice trembling. She said she would never leave me or you. But Margaret didn't stop. She told Veronica that James was selfish, that he'd let her die and leave a child in his care, that if she went with Gregory, at least she'd have a chance to live. She lied, saying James would be relieved to be freed from such a burden. And those words broke Veronica from the inside. Veronica wrote a farewell letter, telling the whole truth, and gave it to Margaret to deliver to her husband. She left, believing she was saving both herself and him. But I already knew what happened next. Margaret burned that letter, then lied, telling me Veronica had run away with another man and had never loved me. And I believed her. I believed her, my father said hoarsely. I was shattered. I hated Veronica because I thought she had betrayed me. And with that hatred, I raised you. I tried to forget the woman I thought had trampled my love. The room fell into complete silence. Only in 20 the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. The truth was harsher than I could have imagined, a tragedy built on lies, envy, and guilt. Because of one woman's cruelty, 3 lives had been destroyed. So, what happened to Mom? I asked softly. I don't know, he shook his head. I searched, but Margaret said she'd gone abroad and cut all contact. I didn't know where to start, and eventually, I gave up. I thought maybe that was for the best. Suddenly, his phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, then put it on speaker. Colonel Whitaker, came Victor's urgent voice, his assistant. I found something strange in the investigation you requested about Margaret Cole. She's been sending money every month to a nursing home on the outskirts of Tacoma. It's not much, but every payment is made under one name, Veronica Hale. The room went dead silent. The air thickened. Veronica Hale, my mother. She hadn't gone abroad, hadn't lived with any artist. She was here, nearby, in a nursing home for the sick. My father froze. His hand shook as he held the phone. His face moments ago full of pain and anger turned cold and unreadable. And for the first time I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Confusion. Colonel James Whitaker, the man who always controlled everything, was now speechless, lost. Send me the address, he said hoarsely. Victor read it out. Without another word, my father turned and rushed out of the room. I grabbed my bag and ran after him. We hurried down the hotel hallway, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. The SUV was already waiting outside. Victor sat behind the wheel. No one spoke, but we all knew. The drive to the suburbs took about an hour, but it felt endless. My father stared out the window, his lips pressed tight, his jaw clenched. I could feel the storm rising inside him. His entire life, the years built on hatred and lies, was collapsing. He had hated the woman he thought betrayed him, but he had hated the wrong person. The one who needed saving was the woman he had despised, while the true enemy had stayed beside him all along, wearing the mask of a friend. I placed my hand over his. He trembled, then squeezed my hand in return. That grip held everything: an apology for raising me in pain, and a father's love for his only daughter. The nursing home was small, surrounded by trees and high walls. The peace of the place felt almost unreal, too serene to hold such a tragic story. An older nurse opened the door. My father showed his military ID, his voice steady. "I'd like to see Mrs. Veronica Hale." The nurse looked surprised but didn't ask questions. She led us through a long hallway that smelled faintly of medicine and disinfectant. "She's been here a long time," the nurse said quietly. "Very quiet, hardly speaks. No visitors. Only one woman comes by to pay each month, says she's a distant relative." We stopped in front of room 7. My father stood still, like a soldier before battle. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, then opened the door. Inside sat a frail woman with silver hair tied neatly in a bun, rocking gently in a chair, staring out at the golden autumn garden beyond the window. She didn't notice us enter. My father stepped forward. "Veronica," he whispered. She turned slowly. Her eyes, faded and weary now, still carried a familiar light. She looked at him, not surprised, as if she had been waiting for him for 30 years in that chair. "Come in," she said softly. "You're here." My father knelt, took her thin hands, and pressed them to his cheek. He didn't speak, only trembled. His shoulders shook with every sob. 30 years of pain, anger, and love all breaking free at once. I stood in the doorway, tears streaming down my face. My parents had found each other again. After 3 decades apart, torn by lies, they were finally in the same room. When they calmed down, my mother began to speak. Her story matched everything my father had said. Margaret had deceived her, told her Gregory was waiting, that he'd pay for the surgery. My mother followed the address Margaret gave her, traveling to a foreign country, only to find no one there. No one had ever heard of Gregory Hale. She was stranded, penniless, without documents, her illness worsening. For years she survived doing small jobs until her body gave out. Eventually she returned to America, a miracle in itself. She wanted to find us, but she was afraid. Margaret, the only one who knew where she was, wrote to her, saying James Whitaker had a new family, that he was happy, and that if she came back, she would only ruin his life. When my mother could no longer work, Margaret helped her, putting her in this nursing home, paying a small amount each month just so she wouldn't starve. She trapped my mother here, like in a prison, isolated from the world, continuing to manipulate both their lives through lies. I listened, choking on my breath. This wasn't just deceit, it was a calculated crime, designed to destroy 3 people. My father said nothing, his face unreadable. When my mother finished, he stood up and said firmly, "I'll be back." He kissed her hand and walked out. I stayed, holding my mother's hand. 2 strangers, yet the closest people in the world. We had been robbed of 30 years, but I knew there was still time to heal. An hour later, my father returned. He looked calm, too calm, which frightened me. "It's done," he said to my mother. "They'll move you to a better hospital. There are good doctors there. Everything's arranged." Then he turned to me. "There's one more place we need to go." And once again, we stood before Margaret Cole's apartment. This time my father didn't knock, he unlocked the door with a key Ethan had provided earlier. Margaret was sitting in the living room. Beside her was her son, looking anxious, his head down. They were talking but fell silent the moment they saw us. Margaret smirked. "Well, here you are. So, did you tell your daughter the whole truth? About the child who isn't yours, about the wife who betrayed you?" She gave a mocking laugh. "Did you both swallow that story?" My father stepped closer, no shouting, no threats, just a steady gaze. That look was so cold that Margaret trembled, her smirk fading. "I know everything, Margaret," he said calmly. "I know about the nursing home. I know all the lies. I know everything you did to Veronica, to me, and to my daughter." When he mentioned my mother's name, Margaret's face went pale as if she'd seen a ghost. She realized her game was over. Her greatest weapon, her secret, had lost all its power. "No. No. It's not true. She's lying," Margaret stammered, but her voice grew weaker, fading into the heavy silence, a silence full of contempt. Ethan looked at my father, then at his mother. Horror filled his face. Maybe he'd suspected something, but he'd never known the full truth. And now, as it came crashing down, it shattered him completely. The love he'd once had for his mother disintegrated. He looked at her not as a parent, but as a monster. "Is that true, Mom?" he whispered. Margaret curled up on the sofa, as if wanting to disappear. In a single moment she lost everything: her money, her dignity, and her only son. My father stepped closer to Ethan. "Don't worry about the money," he said calmly. "Given the new information, the funds should go directly toward Veronica Hale's medical care. Within 24 hours, $200,000 will be transferred to an account under the name Veronica Hale to cover her medical care. If not, every document, witness, statement, and financial record, everything will go straight to the prosecutor. And then people won't call it a mistake anymore. They'll call it what it is: fraud, unlawful confinement, and neglect of the sick. Think about your career and your mother's." Then we left, leaving them amid the ruins they had created themselves. I knew they would pay, would make amends, but none of that mattered anymore. Because that day, we had reclaimed the one thing more valuable than money, something that can't be bought: truth and justice. A few days later, my mother was transferred to a military hospital in Seattle. The surgery was a success. Her recovery would take time, but the doctors were optimistic. My father never left her side. He abandoned all his duties to stay with her. I watched them, two aging souls scarred by life yet stronger and closer than ever. I saw them talk, laugh, and love again. As for Ethan and me, we divorced. He transferred all the money, even more than required. He sent only one short message, saying he was leaving the city and cutting all ties with his mother. I never found out what happened to Margaret Cole afterward, and honestly, I didn't want to. To me, she no longer existed. A year passed. Now, the three of us sit together on the porch of the small suburban house my father bought. My mother is still weak, but color has returned to her cheeks, and she smiles brightly as she pours tea. My father looks at her with such tenderness it makes my heart ache. Justice was done not through hatred, but through truth and love. The family I once thought was lost had risen from the ashes stronger and more beautiful than ever. I found my mother again. And I realized that my father, though not bound to me by blood, was my true father, a man with an extraordinary soul. The worst storms come to teach us how to cherish the sunlight when it returns. My story doesn't end in tears, but in peace, the kind I thought I'd never find again. I've learned that some wounds are only temporary, and love, when it's real, always finds its way home. Life can take many things from us, but the truth can never be buried forever. And sometimes, justice doesn't come from a courtroom, it comes from the moment we choose to let go of hatred and hold on to love. Thank you for staying until the end of this stormy story. If it touched your heart, share your thoughts. Do you believe in forgiveness? Or are there mistakes that can never be undone? I truly want to read what you think. Don't forget to follow for more stories and lessons where each of us can rediscover a little courage and a little love for ourselves.